So welcome everyone to this first session for the first Festival for Finance. So this is the first webinar in a series that we're going to be operating and delivering through the course of July. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Hilary Cook, many of whom you will know, as the developer of the MIDAS scheme and the Master Innholders programme as well. And myself, Deborah Adams, and I will have met many of you before on some of the courses that I've delivered through MIDAS and the Master Innholders, and perhaps in other locations as well. And then it's my great pleasure to introduce Stephanie Timsit, who I have known for many, many years. And Stephanie holds currently the role of Director of Finance with Peninsula Hotels in London, a fabulous new development that I know many of you will be aware of. So our agenda for the session today, we're going to be talking about the importance of knowing your numbers. But before we get on to today's session, I'll just give you a quick review of what we're going to be covering over the course of the month. So we have a number of webinars for you. So each Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So next week, next Thursday, we have preparing a demand forecast for your hotel in the post-pandemic world. Really important webinar. So we're going to be drawing on some expert revenue managers and revenue management specialists. We're going to be talking about the changing world of preparing a forecast and looking at how demand is changing when your markets are changing, and the general economic environment is perhaps very different to what we had in 2019. So a really useful, exciting session for next week. And then on the 14th of July, we have a session looking at food costs. Again, another cost that many of you will know are rising probably above the rate of inflation. And so we've really got to be creative about different ways of managing our cost of sales and gross profit percentage. So we're going to be joined with some experts in the field, including Eleanor Morris from WRAP, who focus on looking at how to manage food waste, and with lots of hints and tips from her around the Guardians of Grub activity, which is a very useful initiative for helping to manage food cost. And then at the end of July, 21st of July, we have a session focusing on energy costs. So again, another big cost in the P&L. And for that, we have, again, a range of experts are going to be looking at managing the cost. So Sue Williams from the Watley Manor Hotel, who is a pioneer in this particular area. We've got information from Hotstats and also from the Energy Alliance. So that's going to be a very useful session as well. As always, all these sessions will be recorded, and you will find them afterwards on the Master Innholders YouTube channel and also on the Arena for Finance YouTube channel as well. So those will be all available to access after this session. We also have for you some additional online resources available through Arena for Finance, my company, and as part of the Festival for Finance, you have free access to a whole range of online resources that we've developed for the hospitality industry. So lots of learning bites, lots of additional information about hospitality finance, as well as a community to join as well. So you'll receive an email from us after today's session, which will give you the links for that particular resource. So let's get started with the agenda for today. So I'm going to ask Hilary to first of all give us a bit of an update about the Master Innholders programme, and you've been running it now for 10 years, which is just amazing, isn't it? So 10 years worth of delivery. So do you want to give us a bit of background to that and the plans for the future?
Thanks, Deborah, and thank you so much for hosting us and for all your effort in putting all this together. It's going to be a fabulous month. I'm so excited. We've spent a long time planning this, haven't we? It's great to be starting it at once. And thank you, Stephanie, as well for giving up your time for us. Yeah, so the Master Innholders, first of all, is an organisation of members, really, rather than an employment organisation. And we exist to promote best practice in hotels, so to promote best management practice in hotels. And an element of that is education. So they run the St Julian Scholar scholarships for general managers and for senior managers. And then we pick up within my company the Aspiring Leaders programme. So MILD is the Master Innholders Aspiring Leaders Diploma, which, as you say, has been going 10 years. So we're celebrating our 10th year this year. So if there's any alumni out there in the list, ex-MILD graduates, then keep your eyes peeled for the alumni conference and dinner in September. And then during lockdown, we also were promoted by the Master Innholders to create this community called MyDAS, which is Master Innholders Developing Additional Skills. So MyDAS is behind this, promoting this Festival for Finance. And really, it's an opportunity to create some educational content, learning content, have a learning network with people in the industry, because we need you all to stay. And the more you can learn, the more fun we can make it, the more we hope that people will see hospitality as a marvellous career and join us. So that's me, really.
Lovely, thank you, Hilary.
Thank you.
So our session today is all about the importance of understanding the numbers, and many of you on the webinar today will perhaps be thinking about your careers in terms of where you're going to go next. You may be in a HOD role or perhaps an assistant GM role, and you're thinking about what sort of additional professional development do I need to do to be thinking about how to manage the understand and manage the finance side of the business as I progress in my career, because it's a big jump, isn't it, into assistant GM and up into the GM role. And with that comes the need to be able to understand the finances of the business, and of course to talk with owners as well. So that's another very important part of your role. So I've asked Stephanie to join us today because Stephanie is an experienced finance director. She's worked with a number of very well-known high-profile companies during the course of her career. But I also know that she's passionate about making sure that the operational teams really do understand the story of the business through the numbers, and that the numbers are not just financial statements, but they are actually, really a picture of what's happening in your business and how to use that information. So Stephanie, can I ask you to start off by just sort of introducing yourself and telling us about your career in hospitality, and really what drew you into hospitality finance in particular?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Deborah and Hilary, for having me. And good luck to all the students that you have on that call. Yes. It's quite funny because there are generally two ways of getting in hospitality. Or you do a summer job, and then you continue without really thinking about it. Or you decide to go for it because you've discovered it by surprise and you were passionate about it. And generally a lot of people who touch hospitality ends up staying in hospitality if they are well treated and if they find a place where they can develop. I am not a finance person. I'm not an accountant, which might surprise quite a few people on that call. I started outside the hospitality industry, and when I was 28, I decided to work in hospitality because that's how I paid my studies, by working in F&B. So I did an MBA, and at 28, I took the job as the number 3 in finance, which again can be surprising, but is very representative of what we find in finance in hospitality. It's very rare that hospitality attracts accountants. We generally attract people who have some experience in operations and then want to develop in a different manner. After I started with long time ago with Holiday Inn, actually, the Holiday Inn Forum. Most of my career was made in UK. I became number 2 at the Holiday Inn Forum. It was a massive property at the time. Now it's closed, unfortunately, for refurbishment. And it taught me about finance and about people, because I had a fabulous mentor at the time who taught me that hospitality is all about people. After that, I became director of finance at Key West, which is a small property in Shepherd's Bush. Then at the Royal Lancaster, which is a sister property. Again, an old lady. And I went to open a property in the Middle East for Jumeirah in Abu Dhabi. And I had a blast. It was fantastic. And I came back to London to do the refurbishment of the Mandarin Oriental in London. Took a break just before COVID. How lucky I was. And then was lucky, really, really lucky to be hired by Peninsula for this wonderful project. So this is in a nutshell my background. Obviously, like everyone here in hospitality, we all have stories to tell. It's never as simple as that. And it's really strange because you might start in hospitality in one area and end up in something totally different years after years in your career. It's quite rare, though, that you have people in F&B, for example, that end up in finance as director of finance, but it is possible, the same way you have people in rooms who decide one day that they want to be in HR. I like finance. I loved operations, but I love finance because finance is all about advising people. And yes, it starts with the managing director and the owners, but it's also having long conversation with the HODs, having long conversation with people who want to understand a bit better what hides behind numbers.
So what would you say would be your top tips for HODs, or so for those who are at the HOD level at the moment and thinking about, well, how do I make that jump up to become assistant GM or GM? What sort of financial knowledge do you think they need to be adding into their portfolio of skills?
It's interesting to see that in the past, a lot of companies were not really valuing the financial training. I remember once upon a time in certain companies, even in the Middle East where I used to be, a person would come out of the F&B ranks and become a director of F&B EAM rooms or or hotel manager without understanding the P&L, without understanding the consequences of the numbers. It is probably a mission of the past, I would say, because whomever the owner is, maybe your own company, like my company Peninsula is also the owner of the property, or may you be in a franchise or any other type of contract, a management agreement. People are expecting you to understand numbers. And the only way for any person who is not specialized in finance to be able to understand is to understand that behind numbers you have people. And we are very good at that in hospitality. This is our bread and butter. So when we are speaking to a regional director and we're looking at the bottom line, the GOP, and we say, okay, your gross operating profit percentage is not that good. How is it? Well, it's better to speak about the market, what's happening. So, well, during COVID, it was relatively easy to say, look, the hotel has closed. This is the number of people that we have left, etc., etc. Today, the biggest issue that we're facing in London is definitely recruitment, in all sincerity. So I was speaking with one of my colleagues this morning who told me that they have 100% occupancy, but they don't have the people to serve. So obviously, when that person will go into the boardroom and explain these fantastic numbers in appearance, they will have to explain also what are the drawbacks. And that is finance. Finance is not to say, oh, 100% occupancy, ADR, 800 pounds, blah, blah, blah. It's to say, we have our rooms that are full, but we have a lot of difficulties where at the moment, all operations are just in the rooms, trying to clean them because we don't have housekeepers. And the story is different. So I would say that whomever wants to be aware and understand the business and come to a position of general manager or managing director, they need to be able to translate the numbers into people or the people into numbers. If not, at one point or the other, they will be facing an owner who will refuse any idea that they might have because the owner will not understand it. I was very lucky in my career. I've had excellent GMs. And the ones that I respected the most were the ones who could have been director of finance because they could challenge me. And that is fantastic.
I think it was sort of pre-2019. We could sort of look at our accounts and say, well, it's a bit of growth on last year. And it was all fairly consistent, wasn't it? Whereas now we're looking at our accounts at this point, we've got revenue probably coming from different markets to where we were in 2019, so different market segments, and then our cost structure is completely thrown up in the air as well. So we've got staffing cost issues, energy costs, food costs, just to name but a few. So suddenly we can't just sort of look at that underlying trend and assume it will just repeat itself now. We've got to look at every line in the P&L, and it's got to justify itself, and we've got to know what sits behind it.
So the industry is managed for most international hotels by the Uniform System of Accounts, and 11th edition at the moment, but there's a new edition that is in the making. And I think that in the review of the uniform system, there is a tremendous emphasis on the trends of society, which in hospitality we haven't been very good at. We are all very proud of saying that we understand our clients, but actually we've been very slow at understanding them and at understanding data. And for example, the USALI new version, as far as I know, will concentrate on fixed cost versus variable cost. I think that what COVID has shown us is that you have good costs, bad costs. The good costs are the ones that have a purpose for the future. Bad costs are the ones that you're not controlling. And then versus that, you have fixed costs where, anyway, unless you want to sell your property, you have no other choice than having them. And you need to understand them. Because when an owner or when a GM will challenge you as an HOD and say, hang on a minute, your profit margin is reducing on a monthly basis or is increasing by that much when I was expecting that much. Yes, you have conversion, you have a lot of things, but if you're able to say, out of £100 that I'm getting in one cover, £70 are already taken anyhow with my fixed cost. It's much more powerful to explain that versus explaining £75 and saying, well, I don't know how I got there, or yes, we're trying our best. No, actually, they're out of the £75, £70 you can't explain in the sense that you can't do anything about it.
Yes,
so it's just a fixed cost.
So
COVID has been very hard on a lot of people, but I think that for finance, it has been a blessing in disguise. One of the blessings is obviously that people are looking at finance differently, and finance is looking at itself differently. We are definitely not the cops. We are partners, and probably because COVID was so harsh and so hard on our industry, and the result of it with having many hospitality professionals living an industry that is very tough and not coming back. Literally not coming back. It has emphasized the fact that finance has to modernize, be seamless, and that actually every single head of department has to be a finance person. Finance is only there to provide the information and then to advise, but they are not here just to be a teacher. We're not just here to say, to be how do you say in English, patronizing people by saying, okay, you are supposed to do so and you haven't done it. No, do your job. It is not how it works. How it works, obviously, is that we are here to find solution hand in hand together as a team. And COVID has helped for that. And the jump in technology, which is a blessing, the jump in technology is helping us in getting there.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to pick up on a few points you made there, Stephanie. Fixed and variable costs. So for the learners who are on the programme next week, we'll be covering fixed and variable costs and how to calculate the break-even point. And I've never been asked so many times how to calculate the break-even point in the last 2 years. Not something that we needed to think about pre-2019, but obviously, over the last few years, with businesses opening and closing, and as you say, all those fixed costs. And part of the government's initiatives were to help with those fixed costs. So with the the schemes for furlough and so on, it was aimed at helping businesses to manage those fixed costs without necessarily losing their staff. So we'll be picking up those points on the course. I also wanted to pick up the sort of the change in emphasis. You mentioned the P&L, and certainly when I started in the hospitality industry, and I started working in a commercial role, it was called commercial more than finance in those days, and really at that point, senior management just focused on the P&L. So they didn't really think about the cash flow. They didn't think about the balance sheet, because that was done by head office people and treasury and so on. But in today's world, if your property is a managed property, or you're working directly with the owner, then of course they want the whole picture, don't they? They don't want just the P&L, revenues and costs and profit, but also the impact on cash flow. And that's been so important over the last couple of years. I know of some businesses that were doing their cash flow daily to monitor what was being spent on working capital and investment and so on. And then, of course, the link to the balance sheet. So, Sophie, in your experience, what do you feel are sort of the priorities for owners, and how should our learners sort of prepare themselves for that side of the discussions?
It is a bit like choosing a job. When you choose a job, you choose more or less your boss, your company. And when you're getting to that level, you choose your owner. It is extremely important because every single owner will have a different objective in life. Some of them are pure asset managers. Mm-hmm. A good example is Blackstone and Colony. They are very powerful in our business. They are pension funds most of the time, and we can't do without it. They are valuable providers of money for the hospitality. But others might be a very small family that has 4, 5, or even one property and have a totally different way of working. It could be that I've worked in the 5-star luxury business, and in the 5-star luxury, sometimes you have an owner who is just wanting to have a magnificent property in the capital, that he can tell his friends, well, this belongs to me. Whereas you have other owners, they will never appear in the property. The only thing that they want is the cash flow. So as always in hospitality, it's understanding the human to understand what is necessary to present to an owner. I never go to a boardroom without understanding who are the people behind the numbers. And I'm not speaking about the numbers that I'm presenting, but the numbers that I'm requested to present. Who is requesting it? How do they request it? And I will really change my way of speaking depending on who is in front of me. If it's an owner who wants a trophy, I will definitely explain how good this property is within the market, how it is seen by the best customers, how it works for their aim. If it's an asset manager, literally you're speaking about EBITDA most of the time, because below EBITDA, it's generally not managed by the management of the property. And of course, most asset managers have their own processes in terms of taxes, which are outsourced. So it is not always the same way of communicating. It really depends who is the person in front of you. And I would say what works with all of them is not bringing to the board surprises. You want to prepare people. You can't go to a board and discuss about an issue with them not being aware of it for a month, just because you're having board meetings once per month. You have to explain, you have to bring the issues and the positive, because if it's coming to just be negative, they're going to think that really you don't know how to do your job. So you have to be upbeat, even though you're in finance. You have to be smiling, and you have to be really, you have to make sure that you're maintaining the communication throughout. And then after that, you can speak about any number that you want. Some of them will focus on occupancy, some of them on their market share, because that's the only thing that they want. Some of them, it's TripAdvisor, and you're wondering, hello, considering the GOP that I'm doing, why am I spending so much time on TripAdvisor? Because that's what they are looking at. You just have to accept it. So adaptability is, for me, the most important. That you're in finance, that you are in F&B, that you are in rooms. You have to adapt to the market, and you have to adapt to your clients. My clients are the owners, and my clients are the HODs. and obviously the MDX come. But these are my clients, and each time my role is to adapt to them, and my team's role is to adapt to every single one of them.
Yes. Well, I think that ties in nicely with a question I saw coming up there, Hilary. Do you want to explain?
Yes, thanks, Deborah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I have got a question from one of the attendees, but I also had a question or a comment, I think, because we've talked about the imperative of understanding your numbers for owners and for general managers. What I'd like to explore is the fun of knowing your numbers and how much more choice it gives us as heads of departments if we understand them, how we can start to build competitions and motivate through the numbers. And that really links to the question that Jess is asking us on the panel. She says, how can you involve all of your teams in the finance of the business? And that really goes back to why we called this the Festival for Finance. It's where's the fun in it? We've had to concentrate on it because we've had to, and we still have to. But it is fun too to know the story of your business through the numbers. So can we answer Jess's question and talk about that in a way too?
I've been quite surprised in my career to see that sometimes very senior people don't have a clue about finance. It always surprises me because I'm thinking, how can you get there without not even understanding how many, I don't know, for example, how many rooms your maid can do in one day, and therefore how many maids you need on that day. And then when you get to a certain occupancy, how many more additional. This is for me, so it's so practical. Numbers have to be practical, and the only way to do that is from the beginning. Okay, when you're opening a hotel, as I'm doing today, it's fantastic because everybody aligns, everybody has the same understanding, and everybody learn the same way. When you're asking people to prepare their budget, they need to understand the numbers, and at the end of the day, finance should not be preparing a budget. Finance should only be communicating the budget the best way that they can. So for me, the best way of making sure that everybody's involved is, first of all, not imposing the numbers. When you do a forecast and you say, oh, well, okay, you do that. No, hello, how am I going to add 20% of covers if I'm not doing anything next to it? How do you think that it's coming? It's effectively being able to understand how the business evolves. And then making sure that when there's a conversation on finance, that you put people behind the numbers. So let me give you an example. I used to have a very interesting regional director of finance who was not specialized in hospitality, coming from a bank. And that person told me one day, by the way, your results in F&B are really terrible. You need to reduce payroll. And I said, what do you mean? Well, you need to reduce payroll. You have to reduce somewhere. This is the biggest expense that you have. So I took the pain of saying, okay, if I reduce payroll, this is how many people we will have when you will come to have lunch. It was a bit ironic on this one. When you come for lunch and you're not happy with the service, be aware that if I reduce the payroll, I will take two other hostesses out, which means that she will not be welcoming you and you will have to find your way to the table. Would you like that? And that's how you have to do things, because it's not percentage. It's people's life, people's effort, people's enthusiasm. And if you're not, as a manager, considering your people when you're doing your number, I think, honestly, that you're not where you should be. And that's why hospitality is special, because we are good with people, or we should be at least. Does that answer your query?
I think so, and I really agree with that. In hospitality, in terms of us retaining people, getting people into the industry, which I know is a hot topic for everyone, and the three of us have had long conversations about it as well. If, for example, a waiter or a waitress doesn't know the cost of things or the average spend or the revenue that they're contributing to, then all you're doing is employing plate carriers. And who wants to do that as a job? If your receptionists don't understand your average daily rate or your total revenue per room and take an interest in it, then all you've got is somebody who you're paying to smile for 8 hours a day behind a desk, and that's not a job either. I'm really passionate that, and I know you are as well, that we get these messages across so that people's jobs are enriched by understanding the numbers.
One very easy way of doing it is making people look at their numbers as if it was their household budget. I've seen that very often, being quite powerful, and that explains also your balance sheet, and your cash flow, because these are elements that nobody looks at, but these are elements that are important for the people who have the money and who have to invest and who have to hire for the service to continue. So I really push all supervisors and managers to go through a finance course, because they need to understand the basics. And then after that when the finance course is finished, generally, I have an hour with these colleagues to chat and to say, okay, now that you've understood, you had this course with this wonderful person, let me understand, how do you manage your own budget? You're getting, let's say, £2,000 per month as salary, hopefully a bit more, but hey, let's say 2,000 to simplify. Electricity at the moment is costing you £400 or £500. How much does it leave you? 1,500. Okay, what do you do with 1,500? How do you accrue for this money? How do you make reserves? How do you make sure that this invoice that is coming every 3 months is still being paid, even though you haven't consumed your let's say your water or anything else, or even your car loan? So I think that is quite a good way of making people understand that if it was their money, would they act the same way? And Florent and I, so Florent is my assistant, and we often speak with our teams of, would you do it that way if it was your money? Some would say, yes, of course, because they don't really want to think about it. But some really take a step back and say, do I really want to do it that way? And that is powerful, because suddenly you have people engaged as if it was their money.
I think that's a really useful point, Stephanie, and certainly for sort of understanding the other statements that we mentioned earlier, the balance sheet and cash flow, that really is the way to do it, in terms of, because obviously if you take a full published set of statements, those can be overwhelming to understand if you've not seen those before, but just build them up from first principles, based around really our own personal finances. I mean, we all do a cash flow, even if it's just in our heads, but we have to do it because we don't want to be overdrawn, and we want our holidays, and we've got to pay for our living expenses and so on. So and then building from that, but as you say, taking responsibility for those numbers as well. So do you have anything else you want to pick up, Hilary, from that discussion?
No, thanks, Deborah. It was just that point about the fun of it and how to break it down and make it more simple.
Yes, yeah. So for the sort of final part of our discussion, we were going to pick up on really some of the challenges facing the industry at the moment. And we know in the P&L we've got increasing staff costs, shortage of staff, and of course that pushes up rates as well, which on the one hand is a good thing, but does present a challenge for our business as well. Of course, we can't avoid hearing about the issues with energy costs, which are daily in the news for us both personally and also in our businesses as well, and of course the increasing food costs too. So we've got a number of pressures in our P&L, as well as inflation now hitting almost 10% here in the UK and forecasted to go higher still. So a number of challenges there really. How do you, and this is to both of you really, how do you sort of see how we're going to manage those costs going forward?
So I don't know if you remember, when GDPR was implemented, everybody saw it as a problem. And I remember going into a forum where a lady said to me, well, GDPR, how horrible it is. And I said, well, actually, it is not. GDPR is just giving the freedom for people to make choices. And I think that the situation that we are facing, yes, it's not that great. I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm aware of director of finances who are making bets. A lot of hotels have a fantastic occupancy. Some of them are blocking their occupancy because they know that they cannot provide a service that a 5-star luxury hotel can provide. They might not speak about it, but that's happening. However, we are good at looking at opportunities.
Yeah.
And that is the most important. The notion of fixed versus variable, you know what? People are now starting to understand. I wouldn't have told you the same 10 years ago. Additionally, we need to be better at what we do. We're fantastic with our guests and we're not capable of keeping our staff. There's definitely a problem here, and the problem is us. So we just need to evolve. And the beauty of it is that the market is forcing us to evolve. And it's not a question of cash. Yes, there is an inflation, but the inflation is pushing prices up, even our prices. So our margins can stay. The only issue is the human issue. So if I'm simplifying a bit, but let's say, yes, our electricity bills have increased by over 50%. And when you think about electricity for a big hotel, this is a humongous amount of money. We're speaking in millions. So you might be saying, okay, how are you going to deal with that? Because your margin is going to be impacted. Well, every single business person will tell you, well, actually, no, because you're increasing your average rate. And the thing is that thanks to COVID, there's little reluctance in that regard. First of all hoteliers have decided to increase, without speaking to each other, their average rate, because they have no other choice. And secondly, the clients have missed restaurants, have missed hospitality, and therefore now accept to pay for it. Okay, we have still to be reasonable, but we can maintain the margin. So for me, the only thing that we have to do when we're looking at this increase in cost, yes, we have to look at how we increase. We have no other choice. If it costs me the double to do a steak, I'm going to double the price of a steak. That's the reality. But on the other side, the only way for customers to enjoy the experience and not saying, okay, no, I can't afford it, is making sure that the service is there. And that is our responsibility. Now, recruitment is an interesting matter. Hospitality has always been good in equalizing discrepancies or backwards attitude. So we don't care about gender. We don't care about religion. We don't care about color or sex. This is the beauty of hospitality. We don't care if a person has high education or low education, because generally we always ask people to have experience. And then if they don't have the education, we teach them, we give them the tools to educate themselves. So this is the beauty of hospitality. If someone works hard, they can succeed and truly succeed. My managing director started in housekeeping. So, there are thousands of examples around us. Now, what we have to do is, all these people have left. We probably missed the plot. But the ones who are coming, we have to make sure that we show our humanity. And that means making sure that they are paid correctly, making sure that they are paid for the overtime, because we're very good in making people having a contract with 40 hours, and actually they work 60 hours and the 20 hours are not paid. Well, we have to be a bit more modern and mindful, because we're having a whole new generation coming through and looking at our industry and saying, I don't want to be treated that way. This is unfair. And we are very good with people. But we have forgotten that fairness is becoming extremely important for everybody. So we just have to get better to that. And I think that if we nail that, the rest is okay. Costs, they will always go up. If I speak to my mom, who is 75 years old, she will tell you that a piece of bread was costing probably, 20p 40 years ago? That's the reality. That's why a property 20 years ago was probably affordable and is not affordable today. So this is the way the world is going. The only thing that you have to make sure is that there's value for money. At least that's how I see it.
Mm. And I think the other piece that we were talking about earlier today is technology as well, isn't it? So we've really been pushed along in terms of the use of technology. And I've seen some amazing applications for things like taking orders and the data collection that comes from that as well. Certainly 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I'd have been sat here with my multiple screens and conducting a webinar in this way. So we've all been pushed along as a result of that, which I think has some very positive outcomes as well.
it will change the business. It will be a fantastic change. I should not have team members spending their time to check that between one system and the other system, 1 is equal to 1. This is a waste of time. I should have all my system integrated, speaking to each other, like that what we do is relevant, which is the use of the data. And funnily enough, 2 years of COVID, boom, boom, everybody can work from home. Hello. You were speaking about that 10 years ago. Sorry, working from home. What are you saying? It's not only that, it's that technology has allowed us to understand our data better. We've been told by technology companies for years, you are sleeping on gold because you don't understand your data. Let us help you to understand the data. And I think that that has finally come through, because when suddenly you don't have any customer, you really need to understand your customers to make them come back. So yes, it has been, COVID for me has been a reset button. I remember before COVID, I was going to my farmer's market next to my house, and I needed to have cash. Today, I go to the farmer's market and they have this little white, it's literally that size, this little white box. I just have to tap my card. And still, you have in hotels, some hotels that are still on these old PDQs, very heavy with, you know, the little paper that nobody wants anyway. And that also is changing. So I think that it will change the business, that in the future, the function of the finance team in the future will be really the one of partner, advisor, which is interesting, and at every single level of the business, not just to the MD or to the owners. So my number 2 would be able to train people to understand his business. His supervisors will be able to train other people to understand the business, because we don't have to spend too much time in making sure that the data is correct. So that is really a fantastic overview from the future.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I love the idea of sleeping on gold. That's an excellent description. So as we come into the final part of our webinar today, Hilary, can I ask you to take a few minutes just to talk to us about the Master Innholders scheme and the next sort of steps if you want to sign up, if you're not on a programme at the moment?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Deborah. So the Aspiring Leaders Programme, we will start to recruit for the new cohort in towards the end of this year. So you'll see us on social media, or you can get an application form through the Master Innholders website. For MIDAS, for this additional skills, developing additional skills, we will do something else before the end of the year. We've got the 3 other webinars coming up through July for the Festival of Finance. And I think specifically, I know we've got some chefs on the programme, so next week's food cost, I know we've got a cracking panel for that, and also the energy costs as the third one. The 4th one as we get through the programme. So preparing a demand forecast next week. I've never managed to do a really good demand forecast, and I do think that's important, that we're able to look forward, use our numbers to look forward as well as to look backwards. I think in the operation, we're very good at looking at numbers from a head of departments level, at the numbers that have been. The numbers that are coming, being able to do a forecast is a really good way of reducing stress in the team. And if we can reduce stress in the team, then we're back to recruitment and retention issues. And then for the chefs, managing food costs in challenging times, I know we've got some stunning speakers for that. And managing energy costs is something that we're all going to be engaged in. So from MIDAS point of view, keep up with us as we go through this Festival of Finance, and then keep your eyes open. Anywhere that you learnt, however you got here today, will be the same channel that we use for up and coming MIDAS productions later on. And if you've missed it or you want to watch again, then all of these will be available through the Arena for Finance website, through Deborah's website, or through the Master Innholders website. So yeah, there's lots of ways to keep in touch.
Thank you. And picking up your point about the demand forecast. So again, I think what we're starting to see is the breakdown of those silos. So perhaps traditionally it would have been, well, that would have been on a revenue management course to be including the demand forecast. The demand forecast is a little bit different to, say, doing a financial forecast or a budget, but looking at, well, what do we do on the revenue management side of the business? But it's not just the revenue managers, they're putting the data together, but they need to talk with everyone else in the business. And, you know, again, it's about comparing it to what would you do if it was your own business or your own finances. You've got an asset, it's open 24/7, so how are you going to use it? And we've got, you know, two key things, space and time, and how we're going to use those to the best advantage. And you know, as Stephanie has said, the pandemic has really made us think creatively about that. And we've seen through the last 2 years all kinds of interesting outdoor spaces opening up, and they're not closing. They're still there as really interesting outdoor spaces, as we as Brits have got used to eating and drinking outside, which we perhaps wouldn't have done in the winter a few years ago. But why not? You do it in a ski resort, so why not do it in London? So I think we've got a lot more creative when we've been looking at, you know, the total asset space that we have available. So our session next week is with Adrienne Hanna, who is an expert in the revenue management area, and Michael Hayward, both of whom have really had a career in revenue management, but also understand the global, you know, the holistic approach to the business as well. And then, as you say, sessions on food cost and on energy management too. So we talked today about a number of different aspects, so the profit and loss, the balance sheet, cash flow. Stephanie mentioned the uniform system of accounts, which is the voluntary system that sits behind the preparation of financial statements and provides a guideline on how to lay out your profit and loss account, namely the ratios you're going to use. So things, you know, where did GOPAR come from, or TREVPAR? All of these ratios come from suggestions from the uniform system. So if you're on the course next week, we'll be talking about those. If you're not on the course and you want to know more about them, then you've got free access to some resources through Arena for Finance through the course of July and August. And we have some little learning bites that will tell you more about each of those aspects of managing our accounts. So a bit more about the USALI, a bit more about the balance sheet, cash flow. They're interactive resources, so you have a chance to do a few quizzes and little tests as you go as well to check on your knowledge. So everyone who's on the call today will get an email tomorrow morning with the link to next week's webinar, if you're not signed up to that one yet, and also information about how to sign up for access to the free resources. And if you're on the course next week, then you'll automatically get those free resources as part of the support for your studies as well. So finally, I think I have to mention what is moving behind you, Hilary. Is that your dog or your cat that's moving? At one point I thought it was a giant spider.
No, she's on her back with her legs in the air, my dog. Sorry about that. I'll just shift my platform, actually. You can't see her so much. She does roll around in the back of the room. All my students know they end up having things covered in dog hairs because she's sat under my desk.
Brilliant. So just before we finish, can I just ask the audience, our attendees, if there are any other questions that they'd like to ask myself or the panelists today? Are you monitoring the chat there, Hilary?
Yeah, I got it. And if there's any suggestions of things that you'd like to see in the future as well, that you feel that we haven't included in our list. So any questions from any of you about how you might manage the finances or manage your understanding of finances in your businesses? Come on, you guys, there's some names out there that I know you'll have some questions. Great. We've got some thank yous coming through, but no questions. Lovely, from Eurus. So what's an easy way to monitor your costs on the go? What's the best practice to do so? This is from Eurus at the Athenaeum, who is the operations manager at the Athenaeum, with a housekeeping background, I seem to remember. So very much on the go in housekeeping.
The old-fashioned way that I've seen in quite a lot of properties is what we used to call the checkbook. So effectively, easy way, there's nothing easy. But when you do your purchase order, you keep track of it, and therefore you know exactly what you're spending on a monthly basis based on when things are delivered. However, this said, nowadays systems are provide you with this kind of overview, and that is the easiest way. So is having an efficient procurement system that tracks your purchase orders and gives you an estimate of what your accrual will be, and therefore how much you can spend, and having your budget in there or your forecast. So you have systems that are providing you with that. But if your company is not providing you with a system, you know what? Get into Excel. Make sure that when you do a PO, you put it in your Excel. PO linen, £1,500 on that date. And therefore, that should be balancing more or less with finance. And I will tell you something. There's nothing more exciting for a finance person than being challenged. So just challenge your finance team. If in your P&L you see, I don't know, 250,000 in linen, and you were expecting half of it, just ask where it is coming from, because you should be able to recognize everything that you have spent. And that is probably, when you have a housekeeping background, it is the best background ever to understand your numbers, because there's nobody, sorry for the other departments, but nobody more down to earth than a housekeeper. They understand exactly what is in their purse. So literally do your column of additions and your column of minuses, which is what you do probably in your life, and get to the bottom line. And if the bottom line is not balancing, challenge your finance team to understand where the difference is. If the difference is, for example, that you took a contract on your slippers that will last a year, and that every month you're going to have 1/12 of this contract that is coming through. Yes, you didn't put the purchase order on that month, but it's coming from a year ago. And in that case, you will understand and expect it every single month. So that is your own way of doing a checkbook without having finance behind your back. Hopefully very soon, almost all the hotels, definitely in big groups, but even in smaller groups, there will be solutions that will allow you to have that reconciled directly by your system, which I hope will be much easier.
It's getting to that point when you get your monthly report, you're anticipating the numbers, and so then you can challenge your finance team. Did I get my credit? Did I get, was the cost transfer in there? And you're able to have that level of knowledge to really be protecting the costs in your own department. And on the side of food and beverage, and you mentioned housekeeping, but on the side of food and beverage, I think really important, do you know the cost of everything you're selling? What is the profitability on all the different menu items that we have? Which are the better things to be selling? And I think that's a really exciting way of getting into understanding the numbers on the food and beverage side. And obviously, it's tricky to look at, say, the fixed costs per meal, but we can certainly look at the variable cost per meal. So the cost of the food on the plate, with that extra potato, that extra piece of vegetables and so on. How does that add to the cost, and what are the implications for that?
Well, cost control is extremely important, and a lot of time is spent with the chefs, but the chefs are smart. Most of the time, it's not complicated to explain to them that if they put a little decoration, it's not adding any value to the plate. The guest is generally not eating it, yes. And actually, it's just impacting your costs. So we, again, have things to improve in there. For example, rather than looking at the recipe only, it's looking at what the guest is bringing. What is the guest leaving on his plate, her plate? Because frankly speaking, if you understand what the guest is not eating, you understand how to reduce your costs. So you just really change your way of seeing things, and don't follow what finance tells you, challenge what finance tells you. And very frankly, some people are doing the same thing in and out for years and don't have a clue about what they're doing. You have to make them tell you what it means with people, or with, when you're speaking about food, you say, okay, but I ordered 20 kilos of tomatoes. Why are you telling me now that these 20 kilos of tomatoes are becoming to 100 kilos? You really have to go back to the root of your expenses. And again, COVID has changed a lot of way of thinking. You spoke about variable versus fixed. I can tell you that looking at your waste is coming very fast to everybody's house.
Yes.
Good housekeeping, I would say.
Yes. Hilary, I think there's a few more questions coming in, are there?
There's a couple. Well, there's quite a quick one. As a graduate hospitality manager, how can I improve my knowledge in finance? It's hard to convince managers to be their assistant and learn from issues in the real work time. So as a graduate, as a hospitality management graduate, how can I increase my my knowledge? Which is
there are quite a few. Actually, just look at what exists in the market. So there are a lot of companies that offer a management program where you go into different departments. If I take Florent's experience, for example, Florent had a management program with Mandarin and ended up in finance, not because he wanted to be in finance at the beginning. At the beginning, he was in F&B. But when he ended up in finance, he said, oh, that's interesting. And he stayed in finance at the end of his management program. So that is one way of doing it. Go and see these big companies, if you can, which are organizing a time in every single department. If you don't have that, speak with your manager and ask for this training to happen. And it can be, okay, if it's a small property, yes, it can be difficult. But there are other ways. You finish your shift, go and sit down for an hour with the accounts payable. You know what? Even though they are overwhelmed with work, this is who we are. We will find the time to explain what we're doing. We might not be able to stop everything, but we can say, okay, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm entering it like that, etc., etc. And that will make you aware. And more, the closer you're getting with your finance team, in one way or the other, the more you will understand. But I've had in my teams a lot of interns. I had also a lot of people who were working in other departments and got out of their shift because shift patterns are very different in operations, and just spend half an hour, organize that, ask the director of finance or the number 2 or one of the supervisors, look, without making a fuss, would you mind if I spend half an hour just to understand what you're doing? And that will give you the awareness. And you know what? Luck comes to people who work hard.
Yeah, just keep asking. Just keep asking.
Exactly.
Keep asking.
And if you're not in a company that doesn't do that, go to another one until you find what you want. So that would be my advice.
And sign up to Deborah's free resources. There's lots of resources that she's offering. But 2 more. One is about, and then I think we need to maybe not take any more. One is about a lady who's working in an organisation where they give days off in lieu of overtime. And how is it best to go about bringing up the paid overtime conversation with your director of F&B, HR manager, or hotel manager?
I think that this is the most difficult subject of conversation that hospitality has to face in UK. It's not the case in other countries. There are a lot of countries that as a whole has protected a lot their employees. UK is a bit less protective. I would say Anglo-Saxon countries, if you allow, it's not a judgment at all, but I'm half French, half Spanish, and I have to say, hospitality is generally bad everywhere in terms of overtime, but some legislations are more protective in some countries than in others. So if you go to Sweden, I can tell you that they don't have the problem that we're facing here in terms of overtime. The problem is that, and I will be very open about it, as an industry, hotels are not very open into giving, into paying more. They can try to manage, they're trying to manage based on the team that they have. Let me give an example in F&B. In F&B, most of the time, the ones who are extremely penalized are the chefs and their crew. Why? Because in hotels, you're working 3 shifts per day. Most of the time, you have a break between the shifts and you have to go back. Trust me, this is not 8 hours per day. Very often, chefs and below are working 60 hours per week. And these are long days. And the industry per se for many, many, many years has said, well, 60 hours, I don't care. Look, take some days off. But most of the time, people can't take the days off. And actually, they often say, okay, I do only 40 hours. But in that case, you're penalized because you're seen as someone who is not part of the team. You're not helping the team. So there's no easy solution. I think that anyway, companies will come to what our colleagues are requiring because they have no choice. When suddenly the strong person is the employee because they can leave even for £5 and go to the competition and get a much better rate, trust me, very quickly, a lot of companies are going to say, hang on a minute, I'd better pay what I owe. And I think that we will get more and more a menu. If you want, you can get a lieu day. And if you want, we can pay you overtime. Could be that the overtime is your single rate. It can be that it's 1.5, it can be 2, depending on how wealthy or how healthy the company is. But it will come. Just be patient. And then, do your homework when you're going into a company. And again, we go back to the idea of owners versus owners. All the owners are not the same. Some owners are really looking just at the bottom line. If you're starting your career, bottom line is difficult to hold. If you're a manager, it's okay, you get used to it, and then you move from companies to companies until you find your happiness. But if you're starting in the business, go into a company that you know will protect your rights, or that will be looking at the future, and try to speak with people who are already working in this company, because all of us have here, the best people in the world have been working here. Okay, we all want to be the best, but at the end of the day, the one who can tell you if it's working well or not, and if it's worse to work 60 hours, because that's how we work, it's the people who are in the hotels. So before you choose a job, yes, speak with HR, but also speak with the people who are already in the property at that level. That's quite useful. And then give some time for the hospitality to evolve, because it is going in that direction. It is.
I think that's a topic for another session, isn't it? Yeah. I think we're really coming out of time now, aren't we? Were there any other questions, or I think we'll probably have
a couple. I've answered a couple offline. One was a technical one about, could you please explain accruals and how they work in order to foresee bad periods when you won't be able to spend so much, which I think is a good practical one to end on. And having this extra money in your purse, are there any other ways to prepare for a bad winter? And thank you.
So accruals, it's very simple. Let's say that you have a budget of £1,000 in flowers per month, and actually you don't have an event, or you don't have the occupancy for that. You can put some money aside for the days that you are going to have a lot of guests coming through. You have two ways of doing it in hospitality. Or you follow your budget and you make sure that it's a bit flat, or you budget for the months where you're going to have, I don't know, Christmas decoration. Very often in our business, we have to organize things months in advance. If I'm taking Christmas decoration, it's a great example. Most hotels are organizing the Christmas decoration in September. Are you going to spend the money in September? Well, if it's in your budget, you might. But if it's not, and you have a bit of money left, and you say, oh, I might need it. Okay, speak with your finance person, which normally should happen with every single ExCom. It's part of the month-end process. And you say, look, can you please put some money aside? So that is one version of the accrual. The other version is, F&B is a very good example. You might have an event happening on the first of the month, and the delivery arrives the day before. Am I going to impact, let's say, in September when the event is happening in October? No. Okay, so you're not going to do that. But on the other side, I might have an order that came through, but I don't have the invoice. Finance is working on invoices. And when finance doesn't have invoice, it doesn't hit the P&L. So let's imagine we are back into our Christmas decoration. I knew that I would have some Christmas decoration that would arrive in October. But actually my agreement with the Christmas decoration companies, that they will charge me in January. Obviously, that should be in the P&L of this year, not of the one of January. So therefore, what you will do, you have your delivery. Normally, your finance team is aware that there's a partial delivery and that there's a partial cost that goes through. What they will do is that they will make sure that even if the money hasn't gone out of their account in terms of cash flow, that they impact your P&L and reflect the fact that you have already spent that money. So you have on one side the reserves, which is putting money aside for rainy days. And on the other side, the accruals, which is making sure that when you have spent the money, you show it, because you really don't want to get at the end of the year and having a bad surprise. And that is also part of the talent of a finance team, making sure that the accruals are correctly done and correctly communicated between departments.
And then you've got a true picture of your profitability, haven't you? And you've matched
Exactly.
your cost to your revenue. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Thank you. There was one last question about the best book, but I can answer that one because it's anything written by Deborah Adams. We'll go with yours, shall we? Best book to understand finance and hospitality. Just Google Deborah Adams, pick it up off Amazon. And lots on Deborah's website as well. So seriously, that's a
new book due out later this year as well. So I just
well done.
Little plug there. Well, thank you so much to both of you, to Stephanie for sharing so much insight and experience with us. It's been absolutely amazing, and Hilary as well. So thank you for this fabulous start to our first session in the Festival for Finance. Don't forget to join us next week. As I say, the link will come through to remind you to sign up for next week's session, and also information about the online resources as well. So thank you to everyone.